She told him to move his boat, but didn't know he owned the whole lake. What happened next? The entire HOA fishing club got a wake-up call they'll never forget. It was just past 7 a.m. when Marcus Hayes stepped onto his pontoon boat, coffee in one hand, tackle box in the other. The lake was still a sheet of glass reflecting the early morning sun. Dragonflies danced on the water's surface, and the only sound was the gentle hum of his small boat motor as he drifted slowly toward his favorite fishing spot. Marcus, a tall, well-dressed black man in his early 40s, wore calm like armor. Navy windbreaker, crisp white cap. He wasn't a man to make noise, but he had the presence of someone who didn't need to. He steered the boat near a quiet community dock, one that jutted out from a well-kept HOA neighborhood, still within the bounds of his own property line. He knew exactly where he was and what was his. He had fished here every weekend for years, usually in peace. But peace doesn't last long when someone like Karen Whitmore is watching. The shrill voice cut across the stillness like a stone across glass. Hey, you! Marcus turned his head slowly, unsurprised, standing at the end of the dock in white tennis shoes and a fire-red windbreaker was Karen Whitmore, OA president, self-declared guardian of the lake and queen of unnecessary confrontations. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest, a clipboard in hand like a badge of authority. You can't park that here, she snapped. This lake is for HOA members only. You're trespassing. Marcus set down his coffee. Good morning to you too. Karen ignored the greeting. I don't care who you are. The HOA doesn't allow non-members to use the community dock. Move it, now.
Ow.
He rested his hands on the wheel. I'm not docked. I'm just fishing, and I'm still well within my property line. Karen squinted at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. I don't care what you think your property line is. This lake belongs to the HOA. You can't just show up like this. Marcus remained calm, his tone respectful, but firm. Actually, I'm not showing up anywhere. I've fished here many times. I know exactly where the boundaries are. Karen's face reddened. If you don't move that boat, I'll fine you. If that doesn't work, I'll have you towed or arrested. A few of the neighbors had gathered on their porches, coffee mugs in hand, watching the standoff unfold. None of them said a word. Some looked uneasy, others curious, but not one intervened. I think we're having a misunderstanding, Marcus said. I've never had an issue with anyone fishing here. Karen cut him off, because you've never been caught. I don't care if it's Sunday morning or Christmas Eve, you're not allowed here. Rules are rules. There was no reasoning with someone so certain of her imagined authority. Marcus knew that. He'd dealt with people like her before. People who looked at him and assumed he didn't belong. People who barked rules they didn't understand, clinging to power they didn't truly have. She stepped forward, phone now in hand, camera rolling. I'm documenting this. So when you try to lie your way out of it, I've got proof. Looked her dead in the eye, not raising his voice, not moving an inch. Do what you need to do. Karen smirked as if she'd won something. Next time, we'll have you trespassed. This isn't your private lake. That's when Marcus smiled. Not a smug smile, not angry just. Knowing he didn't reply, he simply reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a quiet call. Hey Ben, he said. When someone picked up on the other end, yeah, it's happening again. Can you pull up the land records for me? I think it's time we reminded them whose lake this really is. He ended the call and sipped his coffee. Karen was still filming, still fuming, but Marcus had already mentally moved on. He cast his line into the water with ease, letting it drop quietly beneath the surface. Because he wasn't just some guy with a boat. Keiichi was the owner of the lake, and things were about to change. Long before Marcus ever cast a fishing line into that water, the lake had a name: Hayes Lake, quietly labeled on old property deeds and land surveys that no one in the neighborhood ever bothered to read. Marcus inherited the lake and the land surrounding it from his grandfather, Leonard Hayes, a man who believed more in peace than paperwork. Leonard never put up fences, never posted signs. To him, the lake was sacred, a place of stillness and generosity. If people wanted to fish, let them fish. That's how Marcus had grown up too, watching his grandfather wave at strangers with tackle boxes and coolers, never once turning anyone away. And so after Leonard passed, Marcus chose to honor that spirit. He didn't build a dock, didn't fence it off. He let the locals keep using the lake, even the small group of homeowners across the water who built their own dock and called it the HOA, Fishing Club. He saw them casting lines on Sunday mornings and thought, let them enjoy it. What he didn't expect was for generosity to be mistaken for weakness. The HOA had never bothered to confirm ownership. They just assumed. They assumed the city managed the lake, or that the area was public because no one had ever said otherwise. And they never asked Marcus, never looked into the records, never questioned how he always seemed to be there first. Already fishing, already familiar with the currents and the wind. When Karen showed up that morning shouting orders, she didn't realize she was talking to the legal landowner. And worse, she assumed he didn't belong simply because he didn't fit her idea of what a lake owner looked like. Later that day, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the air cooled, panic spread like wildfire through the HOA boardroom. Karen had called for an emergency meeting, claiming urgent lake-related violations. She paced in front of a projector screen like a prosecutor about to make her closing argument. The few HOA board members, present trieries, weekend hobbyists, and passive homeowners looked confused as Karen clicked through photos on the screen. Photos of Marcus, photos of his boat, photos she had taken herself earlier that morning. This man has been using our dock without permission, she snapped. He's aggressive, uncooperative, and completely disrespectful to HOA rules. If we don't act now, we're setting a dangerous precedent. A man in his 60s, Harold Jennings, raised his hand cautiously. Aggressive? I've seen him. Down there fishing? He always waves. Karen turned sharply. You weren't there. You didn't hear how he spoke to me. He thinks the rules don't apply to him. Another member, Linda Barrett, leaned forward. Did you check who owns the lake? We've always assumed it was public access, but maybe we should verify. Karen rolled her eyes. I don't need to check. I've lived here 15 years. It's always been HOA managed. Paid for the dock, didn't we? Technically. Harold murmured, that was a volunteer project. We used HOA funds, but we never got a permit or verified land rights. The room grew quieter. Karen's voice rose. He's threatening our community. I say we call legal. If he comes back, we press charges for trespassing. If the police won't handle it, we'll escalate. She was met with uncomfortable glances and shifting chairs. No one said yes, but no one dared say no either. The room fell into a heavy silence, half fear, half doubt. Across the lake, Marcus wasn't waiting for their response. He was already moving. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived at the HOA office. Certified mail, signed for by Karen herself. Inside was a formal legal notice, addressed to the HOA Board of Directors and CC'd to the County Assessor's Office. The letter opened plainly, to whom it may concern. This letter is to inform you that the land surrounding Hayes Lake, including the body of water itself, is privately owned under Title Deed number 4738B, registered to Marcus L. Hayes. This has been the legal status since 1987, following transfer from Leonard E. Hayes. Karen's hands trembled as she read. The documentation was clear. Maps, surveyor records. County documents all pointing to Marcus as the rightful owner of the lake and surrounding perimeter.
The duck.
The HOA signs, even the little bench with the members-only plaque call. Of it was built on someone else's land. The next paragraph was sharper. The continued unauthorized use of my property by the HOA and its members constitutes trespassing and illegal occupation. You are hereby given 70 to 72 hours to remove all HOA-affiliated structures, signage, and equipment from the premises. Failure to comply will result in legal proceedings, including civil damages and injunctions. The letter was signed, in bold blue ink, Marcus L. Hayes. Karen slammed the envelope on the desk. He's bluffing, but she didn't believe it. And neither did anyone else who saw the papers. Because when a man carries himself with quiet confidence and doesn't raise his voice, you learn to pay attention when he finally puts things In writing and now, for the first time, the HOA realized they weren't in control. They were on borrowed ground, and the owner had just knocked on the door. The morning after receiving Marcus's certified letter, Karen Whitmore stormed into the HOA office with red eyes, clenched fists, and a mission. She slammed the documents onto the receptionist's desk, demanding a meeting with their attorney. "He forged this," she hissed. "There's no way that lake doesn't belong to the community. He made all this up." Her voice cracked not with doubt, but with desperation. Within an hour, she had dragged a local real estate attorney, an older man with silver-rimmed glasses and no patience for dramatics, into the HOA meeting room. He studied the documents for 20 minutes in silence, while Karen hovered behind him like a storm cloud. Finally, he looked up and gave his verdict. "These are legitimate. I checked the parcel ID. Marcus Hayes owns the lake, the dockland, and an additional stretch that includes the trail behind your so-called clubhouse." Karen's face dropped. "That can't be right." The attorney sighed. "It's airtight. And he has every right to evict you." The silence that followed was brutal. Karen's composure cracked only slightly, but enough for those around her to see it. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she folded the papers like they were a personal insult. "I don't care," she muttered. "He wants a fight. He's going to get one." She refused to apologize, refused to acknowledge her mistake. To her, Marcus wasn't the owner. He was a challenge to her authority. If she had to go down, she'd go down swinging. But the community wasn't quite ready to swing with her. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. The lake didn't belong to the HOA. It belonged to Marcus Hayes, the man they'd seen for years. Always calm, always polite, was the actual landowner. And suddenly, decades of assumptions collapsed. By midday, the fishing club Wentz, the local group of mostly elderly members, was in full panic. Emails flooded Marcus's inbox, some angry, some pleading. By that evening, a group of 6 residents showed up at the edge of his property, not in protest, but in hope. One of them, a white-haired woman named Betty Lang, stepped forward with trembling hands and tears in her eyes. "We didn't know," she said. "We thought it was community property. We've been fishing here for years. I taught my grandson to cast from that pier." Marcus stood near the water, arms crossed, eyes steady. "I know, ma'am," he replied, "and I've never had a problem with you or anyone else using the lake." She nodded, her voice breaking. "Then why now?" He took a breath. "Because your HOA president turned this into something it never had to be. She came onto my property. She threatened me. She tried to humiliate me in front of my neighbors. I've always stayed quiet, always let things be. But this was personal." The small crowd shifted, exchanging glances. One man spoke up. "So, are we banned too?" Marcus looked at them, his expression softening just slightly. "I'm not out to punish good people, but I'm done letting an HOA pretend it owns what it doesn't. From now on, individuals can reach out to me directly." "Oh, but the HOA you are. Fishing club, your signs, your pier, they're done," no one argued. On the morning of the 3rd day, as promised, Marcus acted. By sunrise, workers had arrived in trucks, unloading equipment with quiet efficiency. A private crew licensed, and professional began the removal process. They pulled up the HOA fishing club sign first, bolts creaking as they unscrewed the rusted metal from its wooden post. Then came the benches, the bait box, the handmade fishing dock with its chipped white paint and mildew-covered boards. Each piece removed was stacked carefully onto flatbeds. No yelling, no dramatics, just execution. Marcus stood nearby, arms folded, watching. His demeanor was calm, but every movement around him spoke of finality. Karen, of course, couldn't stay away. She marched down the trail with her phone already recording, narrating each step like a breaking news reporter. "This is the injustice we face. A man who never contributed to our community, tearing apart a public space. This is what happens when we let people like him," but the video cut off before she could finish, because at that moment, one of the workers walked over and handed her a printed noticer, cease and desist letter that stated she was trespassing, and that any attempt to interfere would result in immediate police involvement. Her eyes darted to the nearest homeowner filming her. Their camera trained not on Marcus, but on Karen. Her attempt to paint herself as the victim quickly unraveled. By noon, the video she posted online framed to make Marcus look like the aggressor was being shredded in the comments section. Viewers dug up county records, screenshots of the land deed, and quickly turned her into the latest viral cautionary tale. HOA Karen tries to kick man off his own lake gets evicted instead. The crew continued their work. The pier was dismantled, board by board. The posts removed from the muddy lake bed with slow mechanical precision. By mid-afternoon, where there had once been a symbol of imagined HOA power, there was now nothing but shoreline and silence. In its place, Marcus erected 2 new signs. White background. Bold black letters. Private property. Nitrogen monoxide. HOAACCESS. Trespassers will be PROS. CUT Steckerin stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the signs like they were betrayal carved in wood. But they weren't betrayal. They were the truth she'd ignored, challenged, tried to bury under arrogance and assumption. She turned and walked away, shoulders rigid, voice silent. In the lake, it remained still. Except now, the water finally reflected the man, who truly owned it. It didn't take long for the story to go beyond the lake. By the end of the week, a local news station picked up the footage and facts. The headline rolled across screens that Friday evening: HOA bullies black landowner, loses lake rights. The segment featured a clipped version of Karen's failed video, followed by an aerial shot of the now cleared lakeside, where the HOA dock used to stand. The porter, a young woman with a voice meant for truth, laid out the facts without drama. Marcus Hayes, legal landowner of Hayes Lake, issued a lawful eviction of unauthorized HOA structures after being threatened and harassed by the HOA president, Karen Whitmore. She ended the report with a line that echoed through dinner tables across the county. Sometimes power isn't in how loud you speak, but in how long you've owned the deed.
Oh.
The fallout was immediate.
Golly.
Members who had sat silently during Karen's reign now scrambled to distance themselves. Emails flew. Meetings were called. Vote was scheduled. Karen tried to spin the story in her favor, claiming the media twisted her words and that she had been protecting the community, but it was no use. The vote passed 12-2. She was removed from her position as HOA president by Monday morning. She didn't fight it. She barely showed up. The same people she had lorded over were now avoiding eye contact in the grocery store, whispering apologies to Marcus when they crossed paths. The truth had broken through, and there was no patching it up. Meanwhile, the lake changed, but only slightly. The water was the same. The trees still bowed toward its edges like they had for decades. But now, it held boundaries. Marcus allowed several individual neighbors to return quietly. Respectfully, people who came to him personally shook his hand and offered something Karen never did: humility. Betty Lang came back first. She brought her grandson, now 15. And introduced him to Marcus. "We're grateful," she said softly. "Not just for the chance to fish, but for the chance to do it right." Marcus nodded. "You're welcome anytime. Just no HOA banners, no signs, and no club meetings. The lake is for people, not politics." Others followed, some with tackle boxes, others just with apologies. A few asked if there was any way to make it official, a new system, perhaps a shared access agreement. But Marcus declined, made it clear individual relationships were welcome. The HOA, as an organization, was not. The sign stayed up. No HOA access private property. Not everyone was happy with that. A few whispered that he was being too strict, that he was holding a grudge. But those voices were few, and they didn't last long, because most people knew what he had endured being shouted at, was falsely accused, nearly trespassed on land that was legally his. His restraint wasn't bitterness. It was boundaries. Karen, meanwhile, had disappeared from sight. Her once constant walks through the neighborhood stopped entirely. Her yard grew uneven. The vibrant potted flowers she prided herself on dried up, unwatered. A for sale sign appeared, one crisp morning, planted firmly in the grass. No farewell. Letter, no apology, no final words. She moved out within 3 weeks. No one waved goodbye. The morning after she left, Marcus walked to his dock with a fresh cup of coffee and a small folding chair. The lake was quiet again. He could hear the birds calling from the trees, the frogs somewhere along the shallows, and the whisper of wind across the surface. No voices, no cameras, no conflict. Just peace. He sat down, baited his hook, and tossed the line out into the water. It landed with a soft plunk. He didn't even watch the bobber, just leaned back, let the sun warm his face, and breathed in the calm to anyone watching. It would have looked like a man simply fishing, but to Marcus, it was more than that. It was restoration. It was a reclaiming of space, not just the physical kind, but the dignity that came with knowing the truth had finally spoken louder than the lies. He looked out at the far bank, where the old HOA dock used to be, now just a clean shoreline, and he smiled to himself. Funny, he said under his breath. The line dancing gently in the water, how fast people forget who really owns what, until they're reminded. And then he went back to fishing, unbothered, uninterrupted, and absolutely in control, just the way his grandfather would have wanted it.